Hello everyone. If you'll turn your Bibles to John chapter 2. John chapter 2, we're going to begin continue our series on the miracles of Jesus and look at how the lessons we can learn from there. I ran out of Fearless t-shirts, so I have a Never Fear Hogs t-shirt here for you today. So I think I worn all my other ones in the videos. John chapter 2 records the first, it says it's the first recorded miracle that Jesus performed. I don't believe it was the first miracle he ever performed, and I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why as we look through this story. We'll get to that in a minute. And at the end of John chapter 1, we see where Jesus calls his first 5 disciples. There's John, Andrew, Peter, Nathaniel, and Philip. Those are the first 5 that come and follow Jesus, and they're with Jesus as they're going to this wedding in Cana. It seems like those are the only 5 that are with Jesus here, and it's not the entire group of the 12. It says in chapter 2, let's read this miracle, and then we'll come back through and we'll break it down. John chapter 2, verse 1. It says, on the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside, and he said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." Thus, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Chapter 2, verse 1 says it's on the 3rd day. There's probably 3 days between chapter 1 and chapter 2. It's the 3rd day after he has called these 5 guys to follow him. These 5 disciples probably think they're going to work, doing Messiah work. A couple of them were followers of John the Baptist. They're used to being out preaching and teaching and telling about the Messiah and that kind of thing. And maybe as they're on their way here, this is about an 80 or 90 mile trip from where Jesus called the last disciple here. So it took them maybe those 3 days to get there. And maybe they ask him, "Why are we going to Cana?" And he says, "We're going to a wedding. And y'all are invited. And we're all going to go to this wedding together." They don't know Jesus very well yet, and all they know is what John the Baptist has told about him and what they've learned these first couple of days. And they probably don't really know what to think about this event they're going to. Maybe a couple of them think this is kind of a waste of our time. Maybe we should be doing some work. John the Baptist wouldn't be caught dead here because there's going to be singing and dancing and drinking and laughing and having fun, and that wasn't what he was about. But in verse 2 you see why Jesus is going to this wedding. It says he was invited. I like that fact that it tells us Jesus was invited to this wedding. Jesus of Nazareth, his name was on the bridegroom or the bride and the groom's wedding list, their guest list. Jesus of Nazareth got an invitation to come to this wedding. Jesus didn't get an invitation to this wedding because he's going to perform a miracle. They don't even know he can do that. He's not coming because he's a great teacher and preacher. He hasn't even started that yet. He's not coming so he can just do something for them because he's somebody. He's nobody except he's either part of their family in some way or he's just a friend. The bride and groom don't know Jesus as the Messiah or a great teacher or a great prophet. They don't know him as that. I believe Jesus was invited because they liked him, because he was either some of their kinfolks. Mary may have been kin to someone in this family. Maybe he was just a childhood friend of the groom or the bride. Maybe he made some furniture for them to go in their new house, and that's how he got an invitation. We don't know. But one of the things that strikes me about Jesus and his life before he became, before he had his ministry here, is he went to great pains to be a regular, normal guy with a regular, normal job. And to be a regular guy as much as a guy could be that was sinless. But to be just a regular person, had a regular blue-collar job. He was just known as Jesus the Carpenter before this. That's all they knew him as. The Bible tells us that Jesus took on the form of a servant. He set aside many parts of his deity. He was still the Almighty, but he wasn't all high and mighty. He was still holy, but he didn't act holier than thou. He knew it all, but he didn't act like he knew it all. He went to great pains just to be and assume a regular position in his life until he began his ministry. In verse 4, it seems to us that Jesus just went to this wedding just to go, just to have a good time, to support his family or friends or whoever this is that's the bride and the groom, and he's just there for the wedding. He's not there to teach, he's not there to preach, he's not there to perform miracles. He's nothing. He's just going there. He's just going to sit in the chair and view the ceremony. That's all he's there for. The previous couple of months for Jesus have been tough. He had his 40 days of fasting, his fights with Satan during that time. He's had his baptism, and he's called these disciples, and he's made this long trip to Cana. It's been a pretty tough couple of months for Jesus. For these people at this wedding, the bride and the groom and the parents of each, weddings in that day were a big deal. They're a big deal today. But in this day, in Jesus' day, they were a longer deal, I guess we could call them. When we go to a wedding today, we just go for the afternoon, an hour or so in the afternoon or evening or whatever it is. In this day, the wedding, they would have the ceremony and then they would have a party for about a week, sometimes 2 weeks. And they would stay, the guests would stay, and they would drink and eat and drink and eat and drink and eat. It was just a party, a big ceremony. And the bride and the groom were expected to feed all these people and to have enough wine for them to participate with. And it was a big deal, an embarrassment to run out of wine. We see in verse 1 that Mary is already there when Jesus gets there. So apparently she's in charge somehow. She's either part of the family, or she's maybe part of the wedding coordinator people. It seems like it's important to her that they've run out of wine. And she goes immediately to Jesus in verse 3, and Mary goes to find him, and she says, "You have got to do something. They have no more wine." And that seems like the first greeting. It's not, "Hey, Jesus, how you doing? I'm glad to see you. How you been?" It's the first thing she says to him. They've run out of wine. My question here is what I mentioned earlier. How does Mary know that Jesus can fix this? How does Mary know that Jesus can miraculously come up with some wine in a miraculous way? Obviously, Mary knows Jesus is the Messiah. Angels have told her that. She's seen him live a sinless life. But how does she know he can fix this problem? Maybe Jesus performed some miracles back home when he was a youngster. Maybe after he became a man. Maybe one day Mary's in the kitchen and she cuts her finger off when she's cutting up something. And Jesus just comes over and puts her finger back on. Maybe his brother James fell and broke his leg. And Jesus comes over and just touches his leg and fixes it. Maybe something like that has happened. Because Mary is positive Jesus can fix this. Because she says they've run out of wine. And it's just like, I'm telling you, you need to fix this. In verse 4, you see that when Jesus addresses Mary, in your Bible it may just say woman. Mine it says dear woman. The term woman in that day, in today's terms, when I say to Cindy woman, well, that's more of a derogatory thing. But if I say honey, ma'am, like that, that's the term today. And it was a term of endearment. It wasn't a term that he was scolding her. But it was like ma'am, dear, honey, like that. Dear mother, it's not my time yet. Jesus seems to hesitate here, and he doesn't really want to do this, it seems. But these are his friends, and they've run out of wine, and he decides to help them. Verse 5, it doesn't seem that Jesus has agreed to do this yet. Maybe he nodded at Mary, maybe he winked at her. We don't know. But she looks at the servants and she says, "You do what he tells you to do." So apparently she knows Jesus is going to fix this, and it may be weird how he does it. Seems like she's telling the servants, look, he may tell you to do something that don't sound logical. Just do it and it'll work out. It's kind of what she's saying here. Do whatever he tells you to do. She's blunt and she's to the point. Then you see in verse 6, you see the water. It tells us that there were 6 big pots of water there. Those were for ceremonial cleansing. They were just there for people to do their ceremonial cleansing is what they were for. It says they were big pots. Each held 20 to 30 gallons. 6 pots. Let's just say it averages 25 gallons. 150 gallons. And if every serving was half a pint, I figured this up, and it will equal 2,400 glasses of wine. Jesus goes above and beyond here in this miracle to provide for these people. In verses 7 and 8, you see how calmly, how easily Jesus acts and speaks here. It says he tells them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. After they have filled the water, exchange the water back and forth. There's no really big fanfare. Jesus doesn't say a big prayer over it, or he doesn't touch the pot or touch the water or any of that kind of thing. He doesn't. He just says, fill the jars and take it to the wedding feast. Verses 9 and 10, you see the wedding supervisor, banquet supervisor, whatever you want to call him. The servants take the wine to him. And he tastes it, and he notices it's the good stuff. He says it's the custom to serve this good stuff first, and then after the people have, got a little tipsy, then you can serve them the cheap stuff. And he says, what's the deal? You brought out the good stuff at the last. This wine, I know a lot of Baptist people don't like to believe it, but this wine is real wine. That's how he knows it's the good stuff. You can't tell the difference in Welch's grape juice that's just from one jar to the next. That's how he knows that this is the good stuff. And then it says that his disciples placed more faith in him after this. After they see this, they're just like, wow, we have got hooked up with the right guy here. What are our lessons to learn from this miracle? Jesus had friends. I think that's an important thing for us to notice. He was a good friend. He was going to go to this wedding. He had more important stuff to do, sure. But he was going to go, take time out, and go to this wedding and support his friends. His friends had a problem, so he was going to help them out. He was a good friend to them, and he was there for them during this time that was important to them. We need to be a good friend to each other. Support each other when there's something happy like this going on, a wedding or whatever it is, and other times too when times aren't so good. We can be there for our friends. Jesus showed his authority in this miracle. First one is Mary. She knows it right away. She knows about his authority. She tells others about his authority. The servants, they recognize his authority. They obey whatever he says. They do what he says, and they don't argue. He has authority over the water. The water changes from water to wine. He shortcuts the process of planting and watering and pruning and harvesting and fermenting of the grapes. He just boom, boom, and it's one to the other, and he has authority over this water. And then also his disciples, it says there in verse 11, they recognize his authority because he did this. For us, we recognize his authority too. We recognize that he has authority over us. We go to him for what we need, and then we obey and we do what he tells us to do, like they did. Also in this miracle, you see the quality of the miracle and the quantity of the miracle. The quality, the wine, it's the best. Jesus gives the best. And any of the things that he gives to us, it's always the best. And the quantity, the amount that he gives to them is over an abundance. Just think about for myself and think about for yourself, all the grace that is extended and mercy that is extended to you every day by our great God. The quality and the quantity of the grace he extends to us every day is over abundance, beyond what we deserve, obviously. And also, one thing that I see from this that might help us in many ways, this request from Mary. This might seem insignificant to most people. And as far as the miracles of Jesus, you might rank this one like dead last in as far as how it affected other people. Other people, you had people that were healed of being, they were blind, now they could see. Well, that's better than this, isn't it? They couldn't hear before, now they can hear. They couldn't speak, now they can speak. They got a demon cast out. They had leprosy, raised from the dead. Those all outrank this, don't they? They're all seem greater. But to Mary, right here this day, this was important to her. And she took her request to Jesus, and Jesus granted her request. Our prayer requests, they may seem insignificant sometimes. You may think, I don't want to bother God with this, or if we were to tell someone else what our problem was or the thing we're praying about, they would think it was silly or maybe insignificant. But don't do that. Take your request to God, ask Him for help, and then do what these people did. They followed His instructions exactly. Whatever it is He tells us to do after that, then we do it. As we conclude today, I want to read to you, if you want to turn there with me, Psalm 29. Psalm 29. This is a psalm about, in my Bible it has a title there. It says God's mighty power. And this is a psalm of David, and he talks about the power that God possesses. And it's a power that we can call upon. And it kind of applies to this miracle because he talks about water, God's authority over water. Psalm 29 verse 1, it says, Ascribe to the Lord, O mighty ones, ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of His holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars, and the Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forest bare, and in His temple all cry, Glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord is enthroned as King forever. The Lord gives strength to His people, and the Lord blesses His people with peace. Thank you all again for continuing to support me and your class, watching the videos. I still don't have a report on when we can start meeting again for Sunday school. Cindy and I went to church last week at 8:30. Not many went. But if you can go and you feel comfortable going, I would suggest you go. There's nothing like being there. And I hope to see you maybe at church. If not, I will see you on here next week. Good day.